what do we have in place on Chinese made goods? We have penalty tariffs, right? Which are pretty hefty.
Yeah.
And so naturally, whoever's buying or selling those goods is going to find ways to avoid them.
Yes.
Welcome to the Decoding Cross-Border Ecommerce podcast. Again, I'm kicking it off today because this is part 3 of our 4-part episode. And Clint, you're acting as the expert in this series, right? Yeah. So I've got to act as the host and bring you in and let's talk through some stuff. What are we talking about today?
Well, loopholes. The Minimis loopholes, in fact.
And we've got our fancy
we're ready
shirts
for this.
On still. We're ready to go.
How do people get around it? How do they take advantage of it? Not get around it. Why would you get around it? You want to get in it, right? Like you
sound like you're talking loopholes.
Loopholes.
In fact, I know a story about that. Like, why did the tax loophole break up with the accountant?
I don't know why.
It said, "You're always using me." And that's what we're going to talk about today, right?
And people are using the de minimis loophole.
No, I've heard arguments that this isn't a loophole.
Well, let's have that argument today.
Let's do it.
It's going to be big. So maybe before we get started, let's just define what is de minimis really quick that we've had. Yep. I'd say episode 1 and 2 were great, but any threshold that's below in the US, $800, there's going to be no duties on it, which also means no taxes, right? So it's Section 321, and it's it's meant to streamline things that, entries into the US that aren't worth looking at or worth collecting duty on. But I mean, 800 is a pretty big number.
Hey,
so
I love it because I bought a pair of motorcycle boots that $100, but they were under 800. I got them from Germany and they just delivered. Okay, I didn't have to pay any duty or anything on them when they delivered.
Well, enjoy it while it lasts because you're going to, that might change.
So what you're saying is if that lowered, what would my experience be?
Yeah, you're either, when you were shopping, if the German retailer was wise, they would be using someone like Zonos.
No, they weren't. They said, "Hey, all duty and taxes on you. Good luck." And I just knew it was
right.
800. But
yes. Okay. Then what would have happened is who delivered it?
DHL.
You would have gotten an email or a phone call or a text from DHL Express stating that duties and taxes are owed on this delivery that's coming to you. You would have to click and pay for it. And if you hadn't, you might get a notice on the door. They're going to try to, let you know when you get there that when they get there that you owe import duty and you're going to have to pay for that.
Ouch. That would
probably not cash with DHL. I would think. I think DHL is a little more sophisticated than that. I think it'd be all electronic payment. But in a lot of places, you'd be paying cash around the world.
Well, $800 though, that seems like it sweeps up a lot of shipments, right? I think.
Well, let's talk about how many.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk through the numbers.
2024 in May, there'd been 700 million packages worth $33 billion.
So just up through May. 700 million packages that were under the $800 de minimis.
And the projection for 2024, $78 billion in value and probably around, 1.3 to 1.6 billion packages.
So 1.5 billion packages are coming in duty-free, which is, this year is probably going to be projected to be $61 to $78 billion worth of goods that aren't getting duty on them. Okay,
but I think we need perspective, right? Like you need something to measure this against. So 2012, there was 500 million de minimis entries in value that came through. 500 million.
Wait, you're not talking about number of packages.
No.
You're talking about the value.
We're talking about the value.
So we're comparing the 500 million there to the 61 to 78 billion today.
Yep, correct.
Holy crap.
What increase is that?
I don't even know how to put that into a percentage because that's like 150 times what.
Yeah. So, this is obviously e-commerce has boomed, but e-commerce was, that was still going on. And we were in business doing this.
Right.
So we were there to witness it. There was plenty of shipments coming into the US, but it has exploded. And for a lot of reasons, because you can take advantage of this $800 in a lot of different ways. I think
in 2012 it wasn't $800, right?
No,
that was back when it was $200, and then it was 2016 when it moved to 800, right?
Yep.
If I remember from our previous podcast. Okay. Now, can you put in perspective? I think sometimes when we start getting billions and trillions and gazillions, and it all just feels like a lot, and I don't even know how to frame it. But if I think you have written in here some notes that equals, is it in the volume today, that's on average about 8 packages per household?
That was 2023.
That was 2023.
In 2024,
it was even more.
It's 13 packages basically per household, valued at about $600 in total per household, which...
Well, that's a huge jump just from year over year.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
I mean, look...
That's massive.
Ryan, who's been on the podcast, he loves to buy stuff on like Alibaba.
Temu.
Yep, for like
Shein.
$20, $25. A lot of low value stuff.
Yep.
But now Temu and Shein are just huge. I mean, last night, I saw a Shein bag on my counter, and I was telling my wife, I'm like, this thing is not going to last. But well, that's for another episode. So, it is definitely becoming a problem. And so let's talk a little bit about the country breakdown and why maybe there's so much attention on China. So first off, China is 62% of these shipments.
I believe it.
Yeah. So about 33 billion. And the potential tariffs that we could get from that, I mean, $5 billion in just tariffs.
Just China's.
Just China.
Just China's share of it would be $5 billion in tariff if the de minimis was at zero.
If the de minimis was at zero.
On everything.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Now, Canada, which is the next one, just to put in perspective the difference, Canada's 8%, and the potential tariffs we'd get out of that is like 92 million. So, I mean, it's pretty clear where the money is. But, there are ways to get around this, right? So,
when you say ways,
like there's okay.
Like
so for instance,
kind of,
right. So there's there are some rules, right, which says obviously $800 is the daily cap for shipments, but you're
per recipient, right?
Per recipient. Yep.
Okay.
And so if you had 2 orders coming in a day, that wouldn't.
How good do you think they really are at tracking that? And
I've never heard of this.
It seemed like you'd have shipments coming in from all different channels, like different carriers.
I mean, if the only time I could see that happening is a very, very, very large retailer was in the US, or somebody was like, it was just so blatant, you can't miss it.
They were abusing it then.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. So I think for smaller businesses, that's easy to take advantage of, even medium size and probably a lot of large size businesses. And then you can't even spread the 800 supposedly across multiple days. So what is that, like 7 days? What if I have 2 orders from the same vendor in a month? Like, that's super unclear to me. But for our family business, my wife was looking at buying some stuff from China, and like, just remember that de minimis is 800. And so she's keeping that in mind as she's making this purchase. And it's for inventory. And we're weighing the cost of shipping. What's the shipping cost? Because it's going to come in once it's coming in air. So let's set aside like ocean freight. I think ocean freight, you save so much on the shipping cost that it would probably well offset the additional duty you're going to pay, right?
Sure,
maybe, but probably the once it's coming in air. All right, Aaron, I mean, if let's say there's a 40-pound international order coming inbound or an 80-pound, does the price like quadruple between those amounts?
Yeah, it's really expensive.
But do you think it quadruples from 40 pounds to 80 pounds, the price of shipping?
No.
So you're not getting this exponentially raising, cost of shipping, but duty all of a sudden jumps to, let's say, 25% tariff coming from China. It might just make sense to split it up, and you might be paying 10% more in shipping, but not 25% more on the value of the product that you're purchasing.
Well, it's natural, let's call it consumer behavior, being price sensitive. What do we have in place on Chinese made goods? We have penalty tariffs, right? Which are pretty hefty.
Yeah.
And so naturally, whoever's buying or selling those goods is going to find ways to avoid them.
Yes.
De minimis is a huge way to avoid them. Now, all of a sudden, it's like, well, and not to mention that the logistics industry, there's a lot of low cost solutions out there to move a package from China to the US for a very, very low cost, right?
Right.
So they can go direct to consumer fulfilled straight from Asia.
So now we're talking about so there's first off, there's just what I would say is just the de minimis, right? You have $800, just normal shipments coming in. Sure, I kind of get why, let's make things easy. Then it's like, I'm a US retailer, and even if I sell in a store, it might make sense to not place really big orders from China.
Sure.
So there's that angle.
Sure.
The one you're talking about now is, let's say, a foreign merchant, or were you talking about a US merchant? Because it can be either. It can be either.
It'd be either, because it could be the Shein or the Temu, but it also could be, if I'm having my goods manufactured in China, I can start drop shipping directly from Asia to my customers. And there's actually a lot of customers that do this.
Yeah. And okay, so now before we because I want to talk really through some of these loopholes and examples, but before we do, I kind of want to break into three categories. What's de minimis, under 800?
Okay.
The informal entry and formal entry. And why de minimis it's not just a dollar threshold that's different. There's actually different entry requirements, and it kind of goes under the radar. So, first off, oh man, my eyes. Okay.
You getting old?
No. So this, okay, this section it's really light on my little e-reader here. I'm not getting old. I can see. I don't need reading glasses. Okay. Obviously, tariffs are not applicable, but a bond is not applicable when it's under the de minimis. But an informal entry, which is from 801 to 2,500, you need a bond. And then you also, like, an HS code is, according to the data, only 62% of de minimis shipments have an HS code on them. 100% have them because obviously a broker is forced to classify if it goes over 800.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of rules on the ones below 800 to allow for a simplified clearance process.
Yep.
Right. So there's
exactly.
It's not as strict on what's required to get a package through.
Yes. And then when you get into the formal entry, now it's like you need a bond. The administrative fees are really expensive. There's no administrative fees when it's under the de minimis, and administrative fees anywhere from like $2 to $10 or something. So, there's, Aaron, what we talked about this. What is what de minimis is the most generous in the world?
Well, I would think all the countries got together and said, let's all have the exact same de minimis, right? And so everybody's probably 800 USD. Is that right?
Yeah. No.
No. It's not. Oh.
No. Our neighbors to the north. Wait. Well, I thought we had NAFTA, and now we have USMCA. And what's their de minimis?
Yeah. So Canada's standard de minimis is 20 Canadian dollars for both duty and tax.
Yeah.
There is in USMCA that does increase the duty de minimis up to 150 CAD, and taxes. No, my goodness, 40 or 50.
Right.
Anyways.
Yeah.
Only for courier shipments, which we talked about that in a de minimis podcast long ago.
So,
but yeah, it's much
lower. China's is like, what it's so insignificant that you can't even take advantage of it if you're shipping from the US. And so there's 116 countries that have zero duty de minimis,
which means they charge on everything.
Everything. They're going to get 116, and all of them can ship to us and enjoy the high de minimis that we have. There's a few decent ones. Israel's decent. New Zealand, which is 1,000 New Zealand dollars, equates to about 600 USD. Australia equates to about 650 USD, which is 1,000 AUD. And Singapore, which is about 300 USD. So those are the better ones. And then that's about it. Like it just gets to a threshold where it's not very close. So, let's talk about like how companies are getting around this.
Yeah, because we started into that. That was my joke was about a loophole, and I just wanted to start talking about the loopholes. But there's a lot of ways they get around it. We already touched on a few of them.
Yeah. So, companies are building operations around this, like 3PLs.
Yep.
So, ShipBob, right? They announce a Section 321 compliant, fulfillment from Canada and Mexico, and I don't blame them. Like they're, of course, they're going to build their business around where there's opportunities to take advantage of a system. And here's how it works. So, you can fulfill from Canada or Mexico, and I'll talk about the different ways that kind of works. And everything that's coming in from that country, doesn't matter where it was made from, China or whatever, is now duty free. So they can bring in an actual freight shipment, like let's say they bring in an ocean freight, and they just bring it into Canada instead of the U.S. They pay instead of the U.S. So instead of fulfilling from Seattle, you fulfill from British Columbia, and now you have no duty coming to the U.S. as long as most of your orders are under $800, which, as we know, they will be.
Yep, and so I can just picture all these warehouses along the border.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what they're
just. in fact, actually, a lot of these actually go through the U.S. to get to Mexico and Canada. Still.
Yeah.
Which is ironic.
You're exactly right. So let's keep the ones that are going to be valued over $800. My product, I'll just keep that in the U.S. pay duty. If it's under $800, I'm going to move it across the border.
Yeah, well, they kind of go through a free trade zone to get it down through, and they don't even pay any on it.
So Mexico is a little bit different than Canada. Mexico, all you have to do is label it as for export, and then you get no duty in Mexico as long as it's labeled for export. So it's pretty simple.
Yep.
And then if you ever sell into Mexico, then it's dutiable. Canada is slightly different, and there's basically like, three different ways. One is, it's not as simple as just labeling it for export. So you can get, obviously if the country has an FTA with Canada, then you can get it in duty free, where it might not have had an FTA with the United States. And then you could look at the tariff, and it actually might be zero duty tariff going into Canada. And US, it might have a high tariff. So you're like, okay, that you're good there. But the third, which is actually the easiest way to do it, is you just do a duty deferral program. So you just have to, as long as the majority of your stuff is for export, you just have to report every quarter on the amount of shipments that are going outside of Canada and inside of Canada. And the nice thing about Canada is you're now taking advantage of quicker deliveries in Canada and shipping to US. You're kind of getting seems like you're kind of getting
the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Hannah Montana style.
So, the crazy thing, think about the environmental impact on this too. Like, I'm going to just shuffle my inventory around the world in different strange ways to save money on you're just moving packages to places that don't make sense logistically, but make sense to take advantage of some cost effectiveness. So, look, next we're going to talk about what's possibly going to happen, because I think changes are coming. Any other thoughts on the loophole or?
No, I think there's a lot of different ways. It's natural behavior to avoid the tariffs if the ROI is there.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that because the de minimis is so high, the ROI is there, and there's a lot of operations being set up, and we're seeing the explosion of companies utilizing this loophole of the de minimis. And I will call it a loophole, even though some out there try to argue against it being a loophole, which I don't understand that side of the argument. But since all of these operations are being built around it, when that changes, it's going to be very disruptive for those that have been building their operations around it. So I'm excited to kind of dive into that into the next podcast.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. All right. Talk soon.
Thanks.